Why is Jessica's name on this? Clara's voice was a whisper in the dusty attic air. Her fingers trembled, holding a single yellowed piece of paper. Her fiancé David was on the phone downstairs, his cheerful laughter echoing up the stairs, a sound from another world. In front of her was his old shoebox filled with forgotten memories, but this one memory felt wrong, like a dark secret. He had no idea that in her hands she held the paper that would ruin everything. Just 1 week earlier, life had been perfect. Clara Evans, a 28-year-old archivist, was living a dream in the historic Oakwood neighborhood of Raleigh, North Carolina. Her life, much like her job, was about preserving beautiful things. She believed in history, in stories with happy endings, and her own story was about to reach its best chapter. Her fiancé, David Miller, was everything she had ever wanted. He was handsome, successful, and looked at her like she was the only person in the world. When he pulled up to her restored Victorian home in his black Porsche Cayenne, the neighbors would smile, seeing them as the perfect couple for the picture-perfect street. Her older sister Jessica was her maid of honor and her best friend. Jessica was confident and driven, the opposite of Clara's quiet nature. She had always looked out for her, and this wedding was no exception. Jessica was planning everything with fierce precision, ensuring every detail was flawless. At a family dinner, Jessica raised a glass for a toast. Her eyes were teary as she looked at Clara and David. "To family," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "and to the sacrifices we make to ensure the people we love find their happiness." At the time, she thought it was just her sister being dramatic. A few days later, Clara was reminiscing about high school. "Do you remember that old diner we all used to go to?" she asked David. He smiled, but his eyes were distant. "That was a long time ago, honey. I'm more interested in our future." He changed the subject so smoothly she barely noticed. The feeling of being an outsider came in small, sharp moments. At their wedding rehearsal, Jessica and David shared a quick laugh over a word Clara didn't understand. "What's so funny?" she asked. Jessica waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, nothing, just a silly old memory from way back." While looking for photos for a slideshow, Clara stumbled upon one in an old family album. It was a faded picture of a teenage Jessica and a much younger David at the state fair. They were standing close, their smiles wide and genuine. They were both wearing matching rings on chains around their necks. She showed it to Jessica, expecting her to laugh. Instead, her sister's smile was tight. "Oh, that thing. We were just kids, Clara. Everyone hung out back then. It meant nothing." She took the photo and tucked it away, ending the conversation before it could even begin. The final pieces of David's past were stored in his parents' attic. As they sorted through boxes, Clara reached for an old Nike shoebox. David's reaction was instant and sharp. "Leave that one," he said, his voice tight. "It's just sentimental junk." He quickly moved it to a dark corner, out of sight. His anxiety over a simple box of junk was a red flag she chose to ignore. She trusted him. She trusted her sister. She was so focused on her perfect future that she didn't see the cracks forming in her perfect past. Her Aunt Carol, the family historian, always said their historic homes were worth over $1 million, but the secrets they held were priceless. Now, 2 days before her wedding, the truth was in her hands. She had been looking for a something old to wear. Distracted by a work call, David had waved her towards the closet. "Check that old shoebox. My old sport medal might be in there." And so she did. She opened the box, the smell of old paper and dust filling the air. She pushed aside old letters and photos, her fingers searching for the medal. Instead, they found a single folded piece of notebook paper. It was a pact, written in 2 different handwritings. The words were simple and brutal. They promised to end their relationship and never speak of it again, for Clara's sake. It was dated 12 years ago. At the bottom were 2 signatures that made her world stop turning. David Miller and Jessica Evans, her fiancé and her own sister. Her breath caught in her throat. The paper felt heavy, like a stone. Downstairs, David ended his call. "Find anything, honey?" he called up, his voice light and carefree. Clara couldn't answer. The names on the paper burned into her mind, a brand marking a history she never knew existed. She folded the pact carefully, her hands moving with the precision of an archivist handling a fragile document. She tucked it into her pocket, the lie now a physical weight against her skin. She walked down the stairs, each step an effort. David was in the living room, smiling at his phone. "Hey, you were quiet up there," he said, looking up. His smile faltered as he saw her face. "Clara? What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." She just stared at him, at the man she was supposed to marry in 2 days, a man who was a complete stranger. "I need to talk to you, David," she said, her voice flat and cold. She held out the piece of paper. "I found this." He took it, his confident expression crumbling as he recognized the faded ink. The color drained from his face. For a long moment he said nothing, just stared at his own signature. "Clara, I can explain," he finally stammered. "It's not what you think." His words were a desperate attempt to put the secret back in its box, but it was too late. The truth was out, filling the perfect, quiet room with its ugliness. He looked trapped, like an animal caught in a snare. He confessed it all in a rush. They were high school sweethearts, his first real love. He told her it was a deep, serious relationship that ended messily. He claimed they made the pact to protect her, to spare her the pain of knowing she was his second choice, the sister of the girl he once loved. "Protect me?" Clara's laugh was sharp and bitter. "You didn't protect me, David. You built our entire relationship on a lie my own sister helped you create. Every happy memory they shared was now tainted, every loving glance a performance. Her world was a stage, and she was the only one who didn't know her lines." She left him standing there, his excuses echoing in the silent house. She drove to Jessica's apartment, a sleek, modern place that screamed success. Her sister, dressed in a sharp Chanel suit, opened the door with a bright smile. "Clara, what a surprise! Come in, come in." The smile vanished when she saw Clara's expression. Clara didn't say a word. She just held out the pact. Jessica looked at the paper, her composure cracking for a fraction of a second before a mask of control settled back over her features. She sighed, as if mildly annoyed. "I knew this would happen someday," Jessica said calmly. "Clara, I did it for you. You were always so fragile. Seeing us together would have crushed you." She spoke as if she had made a noble sacrifice, not a stunning betrayal. She believed she owned the story, and she was the hero. Clara felt a surge of cold fury. This was her specialty. As an archivist, she knew paper and ink. "This paper," Clara said, her voice steady, "is from a stationery set you used all through high school, the one with the little J's in the corner." Jessica's eyes widened slightly. "And the ink," Clara continued, pressing her advantage, "there are 2 different pens here. One is a cheap ballpoint, probably yours, David, and the other is a fine-tipped pen, the kind you always use, Jessica." She wasn't a fragile girl anymore. She was an expert uncovering a forgery. Jessica's perfect facade finally shattered. "It was just a stupid high school fling," she insisted, her voice rising. "It meant nothing." But Clara was ready. She pulled the old photograph from her purse and laid it on the table, the picture of them at the fair, young and in love. "Then what about these?" Clara pointed to the matching promise rings on their necklaces. "People don't give promise rings for a fling that meant nothing." The photo was the evidence that destroyed their carefully constructed lie. It proved their bond was real, and its erasure was deliberate. Jessica stared at the photo, speechless. The story she had controlled for over a decade had just been rewritten. Clara looked from the picture to her sister's face, a stranger's face. How could she marry a man who had lied to her from the very beginning? And how could she ever trust her sister again? The 2 most important people in her life were frauds. Clara left Jessica's apartment without another word. The silence in her car was deafening as she drove, not home, but to her Aunt Carol's house. She felt overwhelmed, adrift in a sea of lies. Her aunt opened the door and pulled her into a warm hug, sensing immediately that something was terribly wrong. Clara explained everything, her voice breaking as she showed her aunt the pact and the photograph. Aunt Carol listened patiently, her kind eyes full of sadness. "I always suspected something," she admitted softly, holding Clara's hand. There was a sadness in Jessica back then, and a distance in David. I never knew why. Her aunt's words were not an accusation, but a validation. Clara wasn't crazy. The signs had been there all along. That quiet confirmation gave her the strength she needed. She wasn't alone. She knew what she had to do. The next morning, she started making calls, dismantling the perfect wedding piece by piece. She met David and Jessica at her house. They both looked exhausted, their faces etched with desperation. Clara, please, David began. Don't throw this away. I love you. Jessica stood behind him, silent for once, her power gone. She looked small and lost, stripped of her protective armor. This pact wasn't a protection. It was a prison. You locked me in a lie for years because you were too cowardly to face the truth. She looked at David. I don't know the man I was going to marry. Then she turned to Jessica, and I don't know my own sister. She told them the wedding was off. David lost the woman he had grown to love, a consequence of a choice he made as a boy. Jessica, who had orchestrated everything to keep control, was left completely alone, having destroyed the trust of the one person she claimed to be protecting. They were left with nothing but their shared secret. The days that followed were a blur of canceled plans and sad phone calls. Clara watched from her window as David packed the last of his things into his Porsche, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Jessica tried to call, but Clara didn't answer. She was archiving her own past, filing away the pain and closing the box on that chapter of her life. Clara learned that true love cannot be built on a foundation of secrets. The marks left by a first love can fade, but the scars from a deep betrayal last a lifetime. Would you have been able to forgive them? Until the next story.